Welcome again to another episode of the Tech Marketing Podcast. We're here in our London studio, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Mike Smythe. Is that correct? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
It is, absolutely.
Global Tech Alliances Marketing at Checkmarx.
Yes.
So Mike, welcome to the Tech Marketing Podcast.
Thank you for having me. Yeah,
pleasure to have you here.
Good to be here.
We actually met a while back when you were at CenturyLink.
We did, yeah, a few years ago now.
So you've had an incredible career up to date and still continuing, of course, in partner and alliance marketing.
It's scarily 2 decades this year.
So,
so it's 20 years in channel marketing alliances, that kind of wheelhouse. So
how did you? I always say like channel chooses you. You don't choose channel. How did you fall into the channel?
So this is going to be a slight nepotism story.
Good.
So,
we always enjoy those.
so many moons ago, my dad was at BT for 35 years. He left. He joined a small disty. Did that for a few years. They sold to Westcon, so a big distributor. Then he set up his own business, so small kind of distribution company. And I joined him. I left uni, went into the business as warehouseman.
Yep.
So I am an official forklift driver, if anyone needs those skills. And yeah, I spent 11 years in the business and kind of learning everything. Channel, reseller, it was very SMB, very, it was box shifting. It was the days before technology really took off.
Days before cloud, yeah.
Oh, way before cloud, yeah. So that was kind of the origin story, and then kind of moved around a bit and slowly went up the stack. So I think when we met, I was at CenturyLink.
Yep.
So kind of went from telephone systems to a network. Left CenturyLink, moved to AWS, so went from the network to cloud, and I'm now at Checkmarx. So kind of looking at application security, so what runs in the cloud.
Yeah, it's an amazing. I actually didn't realise that you essentially started from. You can't even get lower than a forklift. I'm not putting down forklift drivers, by the way, but I'm just saying like that is the core of you're seeing those sales be delivered and go out.
Oh, it's
all the way up to now influencing them.
I mean, it is. I mean, the time that I spent in that business, you learn customer service, you learn delivery, you learn how to scale a business. We were 5 people when we started. I think it was about 30. Over the course of 10 years, and for a relatively low tech business, that's not bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, learned a lot of life skills from those years.
Is there anything that you can remember from those initial days of you working in your father's company that you still apply today?
So I was musing on this. So I turned 40 recently, and the day before I turned 40, I hosted a webinar for an American audience. And I thought back and I thought that 15 years ago, I was sat there producing a webinar, doing very similar, enablement, education, and delivering effectively the same thing, obviously a different technology. And that's not really changed, But back then, webinars were new. Nobody really did them.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of lessons, lots of skills, lots of competencies that I continue to try and build upon today.
So you started life in your family company.
Yep.
When did you make the jump into more of the marketing and the channel? I'm going to say ecosystem side because we try and use that term now because that's what we're supposed to use. When did you make that jump onto that side of the business?
So I would say it was a relatively. It was both a slow and a fast transition. So I did the typical route back then. I did school and then I went to university and I did business management and law and a couple of other things. So I was always looking at marketing as a potential route. But when you're a 5-person company, you can't have a dedicated marketing head. So you need to play a lot of roles. And I think actually that stands true today. Even in the role that I do today, which is marketing, there's a lot of other things that are coming into the mix. So whether it's enablement, whether it's supporting deals, supporting account managers, understanding business processes. Marketing is such a varied practice that you can kind of go in any direction, and you have to touch on all of the other parts of the business as well.
It's such a catch-all, really, when you think about it. It's like one thing. So coming onto your current role at Checkmarx, so like what does it involve being and I'm going to get this right, a global tech alliances marketing person? So
it's really interesting. So I made up that title when I joined. When I joined the business 2 years ago, they kind of, there was a remit of what I needed to deliver. but we didn't know what to call me. I sit on the regional and partner team, so I'm technically a field marketing person, but I'm not aligned to any geography, so it's global. And my day-to-day is really a mix of things. So I try and bridge our product organisation, our marketing organisation, and increasingly our sales organisation. So the typical role of a field marketer is, in region activation. It's running events. It's maybe owning some of the digital strategy for the region, owning the channel strategy for the region, and I do a bit of that. But I also have to balance the healthy tensions that exist between what our product organisation is doing, the tech partners, and I loosely call them tech partners because they might be integration partners, they might be cloud partners. AWS is a huge partner of ours, and they all play a slightly different role. So it's not channel in that channel or ecosystem historically was delivery. It was either fulfillment or partner sourced, and then you'd support a deal through. Tech Alliances is wholly different. So it's more around how you build out that joint messaging, how you build that joint story, and then how you take that to market. And there's always facets to that around whether you're looking at our product and what we're trying to do with tech partnerships. And then there's the other side of the coin. So what are our partners? Where's the value for them in partnering with us? And there's always balances in that organisation.
I'm really glad you said some of those, because it's something that's been going through my head a lot at the moment. Even for us, and we're a very different company. We're not selling technology the same way you are at Checkmarx, but there is a very clear distinction, I think, between the old school way of partnering, which was very one way, like you've said, very transactional, compared to the more modern way, which we tend to refer to as ecosystems. And when you take that up to the alliance level, it's really around, it's not going to be a question about who can send who leads the fastest. It's much more strategic. Do you disagree?
So I don't necessarily disagree, but I think you have to play the game of a lot of, and I'm not speaking necessarily from a Checkmarx perspective here, to be very clear on that. Executive leaders, in their mind, partnerships, ecosystems are what they came up with. So they are looking at how do we measure this, and it's leads, it's pipeline, and a lot of the time, and the job that I do, and I've got some phenomenal counterparts in the product organisation and elsewhere at Checkmarx specifically, is how do you position to executive leadership the actual long-term value of the partnerships that you're building? Because you can't look at them as transactional, as you say, and I do push back a little bit on this ecosystems, because I think it's so, it lacks specificity over where you play in that ecosystem, because it's a spectrum. Within an ecosystem, it could be fulfillment on a kind of reseller level, but the ecosystem is so wide. So I much prefer alliances, because I think that delineates between where you're necessarily driving partner source pipeline, and you can look more into influenced and things like reducing churn.
I couldn't agree with you more, actually, on the ecosystem piece. I struggled with that definition for, goodness, probably 18 months, where when it started to get used in the world, in the ecosystem. Some of the best definitions I've seen are non-transactional, recognizing non-transactional partners. Is one way of putting it. Like how have you tried to make it more specific? Like, what's been your...
Great question, and it's a difficult one to answer. I can certainly talk about...
I don't think anyone's got an answer for it.
I don't think they do, and I think as we, I spent some time at AWS running their EMEA ISV kind of go-to-market from a partner marketing perspective, and you have to kind of look at the organisation that you're in will define alliances and ecosystems slightly differently. Certainly, when I was at AWS, we were the big fish in the pond, so everybody played in our program. At Checkmarx, it's different because we're mid-size, we're 20 years old, there or thereabouts. We're not IPO'd, but it's a 1,000-person business, so it's not small, and we have partners that are both smaller than us and larger than us. And the way that we have structured our program is to allow us to both set some guardrails for the smaller partners we may have, and also allow us to play in the programs of our larger partners, the AWS, the ServiceNow. Mm-hmm. And getting back to your original question of how do you define those relationships and the metrics, you kind of have to take a step back and look for you and your organization, which of these programs is more strategically valuable to us, and which ones are we going to place our bets on in terms of awareness activity, in terms of demand gen activity, and then look at who's leaning in. Because we have some great partners who are significantly smaller than us, but they'll lean in really heavily. So that gives us an indication of where there might be kind of mutual material benefit to doing more with that type of partner.
And it's something we've referred to it on the podcast before as, are you the burger or are you the fries?
Yeah.
It's one way of, is someone buying AWS first, as an example, or are they buying another? And actually, thinking about a big partner like Amazon, they're probably playing both.
Oh, it's not only they playing both, it's in that relationship. Oftentimes AWS is the burger shop as well, because we're, marketplaces, and that's a whole discussion for another day, but marketplaces are fundamentally changing the way that a lot of enterprise and mid-market procure software. It's changing the way that teams work, from legal to procurement. It is really driving a lot of change, but I think people do over-egg, in some instances, the importance of that, because fundamentally you still need that strength in partnership and that commitment before you look at a marketplace to really deliver the value.
I definitely want to come back to that in a bit, because you're right. That's probably a whole separate podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
But talking about how you decide some of the smaller partners, some of the bigger ones, which ones commit to you, which ones you commit to them. Like, how do you report? You talked about measurement a moment ago. Like, how do you report on that back to the board or back to your leadership to say, these are what metrics do you look at? What's important in those relationships?
Depends on who you talk to. So if you're kind of my day-to-day is, I report into various stakeholders, our CRO, our CMO, you've got the CEO who takes an interest in these things. That's more of a kind of a regular cadence of reporting, and that is pipeline, number of partners, number of opportunities, influence. There's a whole group of metrics that you can look at that level. For me, when I joined Checkmarx 2 years ago, and Checkmarx, and actually maybe it's good if I spend a bit of time describing who Checkmarx is, because people may not be aware. So we're an application security testing company. So we secure an organization's code when they're developing it. So typically our buyers are large financial institutions, large entertainment, retail, manufacturing, people like Disney, people like Visa, and we sit across their software development lifecycle. And we ensure protection when the application is being built. So the thing for me, and the real draw coming to Checkmarx, is they just launched 3 years ago their first cloud native platform. And because the nature of this platform touches so many other pieces of an organization's processes, there's a massive opportunity for partnerships and integrations. So you're integrating both into the core development processes they have with some of the SDLC tools. We're integrating with our cloud and runtime partners, so some of the fastest growing cybersecurity companies today partner with us to provide the left-hand side of the security envelope, if you will. So with that in mind, and going back to the kind of the original point, is there's so much scope in these partnerships to deliver value. For me, when I set the program up, the kind of two core metrics I looked at was rate of partner sign-up and rate of partner activation. And those two things, if I look back a year when we launched the program, I think we had 6 launch partners. We're gonna exit the first year with about 50, of which we've probably got around 10 that we have activated in terms of go-to-market.
And just to be clear on when you say rate of here, is that the velocity or the?
It's both.
Both.
So it's the overall count per category. And obviously when you're building a program, you can categorize in all sorts of ways. For us, we always do things with a customer lens first. So we've grouped them into logical groupings from a customer's perspective. And for me, the real important thing is it is so easy to fall into the trap of logo vanity. How many logos can I put on my partnerships page? You know, it makes me look great. I partner with 500 organizations, but if you've got no material relationship with those partners, or there's no material available integration, it's meaningless for customers. So I'm very specific that all of the partners we list as partners have a generally available integration, which means that a customer, if they have us and they have the partner installed in their system, they can very easily connect the two and start to deliver that joint value. And we won't go away from that because it's a customer first mindset.
I actually, being a techie at heart, like I've not used Checkmarx myself. You know, we use a variety of different static and dynamic like code analysis tools. But having tried to deploy some of these, I think what you've done there is quite clever in the sense of it's a very defined goal. Like you must have a GA available product, otherwise, because it's so easy to fall into a trap of, let's make a beta version, or let's release something behind the scenes, or we've done lots of good work together, and without something tangible that a customer can see, it becomes. You know, we were actually talking earlier in the pre-recording, just before you came up, Mike, around organisations that do this very well, and there are some organisations, some that you've worked with in the past, that tell a very good story, but when it comes to actually deploying it,
it's vaporware.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so I think you may not realise what you've done there, but I think it's really interesting how you've made that requirement that it has to be GA.
Well, and that's not to say all of the vaporware, the beta, the canary, all of that doesn't happen, because it absolutely does. And oftentimes, if we've got a mutual customer who has been the spark of requirement from both sides, they will happily be a trialer, beta. They will help us develop the integration. They'll help us kind of rationalize how we do this, why we do it in this way. There's a great use case actually that we're going to be diving into with Sysdig really soon. So we've partnered with Sysdig for, I think, publicly about 6 months. Prior to that, it was a bit longer. And we partner with Sysdig so we can bring container insights, which is what Sysdig is known for, into our platform and broadly surface where vulnerabilities are running at runtime in their containers. We've been working with Sysdig now on the bi-directional integration where we can send results to them, and we're actually using AWS Lambda functions to achieve that. So this is where we start to see there's a use case, it's driven by a customer, and then we're actually leveraging a cloud provider to be that glue. And for me, that's great. To see that kind of thing actually hit the market, absolutely amazing, because it means for me that the partners we've chosen and the product team do an amazing job at going out and finding those partners who are going to deliver real value. To see that coming together in a product that's supported in multiple ways is amazing.
There's a couple of things that, as a technologist, get me excited, and then I want to let's keep going into that down that product avenue. But the often when you're looking at some of these partnerships, there's got to be quite an investment up front to discover what the integration points are, to do the engineering work both from their side and your side. There's, from my perspective, I think there's quite a high rate of failure of those projects. How, before you're able to report that to your team, and certainly for the engineering teams where their time is probably quite stretched and costly. How do you get that sell-in to keep the momentum up to get something across the line? What tactics or things have you seen?
Yeah, so I think you almost have to take a step back from. You don't want to get into that situation. Fundamentally, you don't want to get into a situation where every integration or every partnership requires an outsized level of engineering investment on either side, because if you do that, you're throttling your ability to scale. So the approach that we've taken is a standardized set of rich APIs that expose
very much the AWS approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
That expose core capabilities,
Yep.
and we provide those APIs, the documentation, and the support for partners to write integrations to us. And that's kind of a partner-led motion. So we'll obviously support them from a technical point of view, and then when we get to the point that we think there'll be a generally available integration, that's kind of when I step in and do the more go-to-market conversations around the level of investment we both want to make. You know, is it a webinar talking about it, or is it a networking dinner at RSA in the US? There's a spectrum of that.
Yep.
So our approach has absolutely been let's standardize, let's productize partnerships as much as we can, and then there are where you place your big bets. So we look at the areas that will make the most impact for customers and where we think the market is going, and we look at the players in those spaces, and we kind of weigh up options in that group and feel out whether they're interested to work together. In most instances, where Wiz and Sysdig are great examples where the cloud native application protection platforms, so the CNAPs and the CNASs are exploding in terms of growth, and we're partnering with many of them to provide that lens back into the development side. And from a customer's perspective, what they can then do is they can holistically look at runtime protection and pre-deployment protection and marry those two things together, which it increases fidelity from their perspective for vulnerability mitigation. So there's a whole load of benefits, but in order to get there, you need that really strong alliances, partnership, ecosystem, whatever you call it, to really drive that awareness and that ease of integration.
So coming back, what I'm kind of the common thread I'm seeing here almost, because you're getting involved almost quite late on in some of those product conversations. Not really late on, but some of it, they've done the feasibility, the partner's interested, then you may go and find a customer together. That is a cross between product, and I'm going to roll engineering into product for a second, marketing, which is obviously you, and sales, because you need the customer to be part of it as well. Like we were talking in our pre-call about that being like the trifecta.
We were, and post that call, I've thought about it a bit more, and I think the analogy I used at the time was there's a triangle or trifecta, however you put it, that you need for a successful tech partner, tech alliance, tech ecosystem play. You need everybody at the table. You need sales, you need marketing, and you need products. I'm actually going to add to that, and I'm going to make it a pyramid, because I think there's a base that crosses all of them, which is operations. So commercial operations. Not oftentimes probably talked about on a marketing focused podcast, but I think the ops role, the reporting role, the analytics in the background, all of that is hugely important. But focusing on the kind of main three of sales, technical, and marketing, you can have sales and marketing aligned and not product, and you won't deliver value for customers because the product, there's no differentiator, it's not adding any additional value. You can have technical, product, and marketing, but if you haven't got sales, you're not going to drive any meaningful revenue. And on the flip side, if you've got sales and product but no marketing, you're really limiting your reach. So you have to have all three, or a plan to have all three on a per partner basis to really, really ignite that flywheel of customer success, innovation. It breeds testimonials, it breeds case studies, it breeds market awareness, and that will continue and scale out and feedback, frankly, to the importance of putting more time in the engineering. Because these integrations, often there's a kind of a minimum viable product that we jointly deliver. There's always so much more scope to do more. But you need to prove that there's going to be revenue at some point.
But you mentioned commercial operations there as the foundation.
Yes.
So what do they add to those three? Well, if you don't have them, what happens?
So what you have, and kind of it's commercial operations or operations more broadly, because it takes a team, and it touches on measurement. So are you aligned from a goals perspective, for example? Are you able to report in your CRM of choice whether an integration is active in an account. If you're running a SaaS product, have you got a tool that delivers telemetry to the organisation that's responsible for looking at partnerships, so that you get that visibility and insight into the traction that your efforts are making. And if you don't, you're flying blind, and you're going often on gut feeling, or you're going on those outlier deals that will land and will make a partnership look great, but they're not repeatable because it's a very specific use case. So all of these things, I think, from an operations point of view, if you haven't got the foundations of your ops right, then the three-way sales, products, marketing is never going to take flight.
In fact, what really sparked my thought there was it's very similar to running any kind of transformation process. And we again, like many businesses, and I'm sure you're the same at Checkmarx and every business that's probably listening to this podcast now, we're all going through a big transformation with AI. And one decision we made is having what's called a transformation monitoring team, which sounds really technical, but essentially, if you've got sales, marketing, and product all working together on a common goal, you've got some very big egos that are very good at telling very big stories. You've got sales who will probably tell you that deal is worth billions. You've got marketing who own most of the metrics and can probably tell quite a good story. So you need that commercial operations team, I think, as you mentioned there, to mark your homework for you in some ways, to come in and level set and be like, this is the difference it's made. And even just that minor point you made there around, can you tell if someone is using your product in the CRM? That is so often forgotten about. I would probably wager that many partnership deals haven't happened because they haven't been able to measure that success because of that, and many happened that probably shouldn't have happened.
For sure.
Because they weren't able to.
But there is a flip side to that, and the flip side is if you operate a business at scale, and you put measurement metrics around certain things, and you give the people at the coalface of those relationships the ability to, let's say, tag an opportunity as having a tech partner involved, or being attributed to a partner-related marketing campaign, without the checks and balances of validation, you run the risk of driving the business in a direction of doing things for the metrics and not doing things for the outcome that you're looking to drive.
So essentially, you'll over-optimize for the metrics instead of customer outcomes.
And instead of customer outcomes, and it always comes down to relationship. If you're running everything on metrics, you for sure will get in a situation where you're sat in front of a partner who may have built a great integration with you, you may have joint customers, but if you're not hitting the metrics and your alliances team, that is what they're being told to hit, you will deprioritize that partnership for the wrong reason. So I think relationship and emotional maturity, and it's one of the things that really scares me about AI, by the way, another conversation for another day, is you've got to look at things both objectively and of the art and the science, and really make sure that you're not going off track just to meet an artificial number.
This is something that, I've always struggled with, right? Because I am someone that likes to see a metric, yet there's been so many examples of people I've interviewed on this podcast where it can be one dinner meeting that sparks a conversation that then creates an entire, not just marketing campaign, but entire line of product. So we recently had a sales leader from Cisco on, and he talked around how one conversation over dinner with a partner and a charity sparked essentially saving all the rhinos on the planet. From being poached, right? Or maybe that might be going a little bit far, but like they essentially went down from 15 poaching incidents a week down to 0, just due to the fact they had dinner together and discussed a problem and then decided to solve it. Like, so how do you mold those two mindsets together like that? Like,
I'm not sure you wholly can. I think you can't, and I'm hugely fortunate in my current role that we've got a leadership team who give people the latitude to make mistakes. They give people a voice to have differing opinions, and to fight the corner. But equally, it's a business. So we have got core metrics, core goals that we're driving to, and the team is maniacally focused on that. But as long as you are able to balance the metric-driven behaviour with the longer-term strategy work, and they're not mutually exclusive either, and it comes back to measurement, and you kind of triggered something in me saying, you know, you're a man for metrics. My question to that is always over what timeline? Because you can say it's in a year, you can say it's in 6 months. A lot of the partnerships and alliances and ecosystem players, they play out over a timeline of years. And over that time, you will absolutely have a change in executive leadership. So you will need to continue to reiterate the story, the reasoning, the impetus to do these things. And metrics are just a tool to do that.
See, I think you've triggered something in me there as well, right? Because I think there's a lot that, I'm going to say Wall Street is the best way to describe it, has to answer on impacting technological innovation and partnerships. Because, you know, that timeline you just mentioned, some of this stuff does take, you can't develop an integration at a strategic level between two organisations inside of 3 months, at least. You can't develop it, test it, get it to market and show progress. Yet we are now so driven by those quarterly metrics that I think, again, it puts a big risk on how you can, you know, whether you can even go ahead with a project like that.
It does and it doesn't. I think one of the trends I'm certainly seeing is, and it is the whole ecosystem word, partnerships for a very long time were not the sexy thing in the room. They were the thing that nobody really knew how to measure, the thing that nobody really knew what to do with, certainly in a general business sense, outside of kind of traditional channel, telecoms being the big one. What you are starting to see is more structure, more experience, more strategic leaders coming into alliance roles. And I think what you're starting to see is those integrations, those alliances are becoming strategic differentiators in the market. So whilst the Wall Streetification of timelines and quarters, etc., fundamentally, most of the founders and the executive teams of these organisations, they're looking for an exit, an IPO. They're looking for their next gig. So they are willing to, you know, do that 10% of non-attributable activity because it may have an outsized impact on the future direction of their careers and their company's careers.
Interesting. I think, but it's just how you continue to justify it that keeps coming back through my head. Like the easiest way I can think about this, and this is very moving from being very strategic and board level to very simple for a second. You know, I was speaking to another actually exec that was in charge of partnerships, and he was mentioning how he was flying out to New Zealand next month to go and spend a few days with a partner. And I asked, like, how do you justify that spend? And that time out of your day as an executive? And the answer I got really was, well, we just have to. Like they've just signed on with us. We need to show that we're willing. So it's like at a very simplest level, it's like, how do you add some metrics around that relationship that I still haven't been able to wrap my head around? And I think the answer might just be, you can't. You have to sometimes. It's like alchemy. I guess
it is. It's a little bit like alchemy, and it's a little bit like dating.
Yes. Okay.
So on a purely personal level,
we do love a dating analogy on the podcast.
Do you? I didn't know that. Maybe I've hit upon a recurring theme with you, but it's a bit like dating in that you, throughout the course of your life, whether you're, you know, how you approach relationships says a lot and is a good indicator of how those relationships will last, mature, and change over time. And I think the best partnership leaders I've worked with have been people first, process second, and technology third. And a lot of what I see, and maybe I'm in a LinkedIn bubble or a social media bubble, but there seems to be a real push at the moment to wrap technology around partnerships and alliances. There's
Yep.
a lot of PRMs and CRMs that are tailored and that kind of thing. And fundamentally, it's great. Go invest in a tool, but understand why you're building the tool. If your business is, if you've got 10 strategic partners, you should be able to manage those relationships with a team of 2 or 3
Yep.
people who are really focused on those 10. If you're looking to go and build a channel of 100, 200 partners in Europe or globally, I don't think technology is ever it will support scaling, but I don't think it will ever scale, i.e. drive the scaling. It's the people and the process first.
I, as a technologist, you'd think I'd react violently to that. And it's been a learning I've gone through. Like I've got many case studies that I can go through on this, but if you try and start technology first and you build it, they will not come.
No.
Like you've got to,
Yep.
I completely agree with you. It's one of my learnings I've seen is you've got to start with people
Yep.
and the relationships. You've got to make sure you've got a solid process, and then technology is the flywheel that can make it speed up.
Yeah.
But you can't just rely on it being a magic bullet.
No.
So completely agree. So that brings us on kind of the future of tech alliances and partnerships. Like what trends are exciting you that you're seeing? What trends scare you as well? You mentioned AI earlier.
I did. So let's tackle AI for now. So at Checkmarx on a corporate level, we've taken a different tack to a lot of the market. We haven't just gone, let's plug in ChatGPT or one of the other LLMs to deliver something for customers, because I think there's risk, and given the type of security company that we are, we would not want to introduce that level of risk into our operations and our customers. I think on a marketing lens, I'm now able to tune out anything that says in today's rapidly changing world, if they delve into anything, I've got a list of maybe 40 phrases and keywords that I know in my mind, and if I see that in a blog, a post, it immediately makes me think that the person who is saying and sharing such stuff is not an expert, does not know what they're doing, or haven't taken the time.
Make sure I note these down.
Haven't taken the time to actually build something that has any value. They're filling this void with AI-generated nonsense, and bots are liking it and responding to it. And maybe I am old school, maybe I'm over the hill, but I would rather people do one thing a week well than 90 things a week generated by AI that has no meaning.
Completely agree. And actually, I saw a stat last week of number of emails. It's a really good blog post where someone's analysed every email they've received and what it talks about and the volume that they've been receiving them. And post ChatGPT, you can see a massive spike where everyone is using, I'm going to say MarTech with thinly veiled ChatGPT integrations. And you can see a huge spike. But we are now moving towards a world where, and I think the education analogy is the funniest, right? You've got students using ChatGPT to write their essays for them. And then you've got the professors saying and teachers saying, don't do that, but then using ChatGPT to mark them. And so we've just got bots talking to bots. And the same thing's going to happen with emails as well. I would rather someone spent the time writing a well-written email that was personalised to me and short than some of the drivel that we get with AI. And I think we are going to head for that correction if we continue on this course.
I hope we do. And it saddens me a bit that of all the use cases of AI, marketing, which should be something that is rooted in psychology, behavioural science, personal connection, has been the thing that has, from my perspective anyway, sparked so many third-party tools. I think we should be using AI and the large language models. And I was doing this before AI was a thing with Databricks at AWS and various other places to do the menial stuff that people don't or can't do. There's a lot of reporting, number crunching, actual use cases where there is value. Using AI and the horrific environmental impact of some of these things to write a landing page that is often quicker for you to write yourself than using ChatGPT worries me hugely.
Especially, but I was thinking about that exact point earlier this week, actually, where you have let's use an LLM. Let's make it more general. It's not just ChatGPT's fault, but you have an LLM writing the copy, and then you have one on the other side reading it and summarising it for people.
Yes.
Just think of the environmental impact and sustainability of both of those items doing that together. It's crazy.
And then I'm sure we are not far away from having deepfake video generated webinars where the script is written by ChatGPT. It'll take 2 solution briefs and they'll generate some talking heads, and everybody will be sat bored rigid because there's no original content. It's not
sea of same is what we
absolutely.
But okay, so the AI scares us.
It does.
What excites us about tech alliances?
So I think AI. I think AI is the in all seriousness, I think the in alliances, there are there's been some seismic shifts over the past 5-10 years. The big hyperscalers, cloud providers have driven a lot of innovation because people can experiment for relatively little money. I think marketplaces are not only becoming important because they have been for 5 years, but I think we'll start to see marketplaces mature into proper multi-party, kind of 2 or 3 ISVs who have got an integration, bundling an offer that's bespoke for a client. I think there's a lot of automation in that. And I think security is where it's going to happen first, because of the depth and breadth of vendors that are on the marketplaces for that. So I think they will play a critical role. I think some of the approaches from an executive level will start to see and start to better understand the role that alliances can play in those strategic visions. I think we've definitely broken the first wave of that, and I think we'll continue to see more.
We've done a lot of agreeing on this podcast. I think we've done some disagreeing as well, I'm definitely seeing there be more, those 2 trends have continued over the last 5 years. I think the next jump is in the alliances space, where the hyperscalers are looking to drive their own bottom line up, and they see that as a way of doing it, but they've also got a lot to give and a lot of resources where they can help companies move faster. So I think if we can get aligned around some of the right Gen AI solutions or the right services, I think we're definitely seeing acceleration there, and I'm seeing that creep into everything from simple product delivery down at the bottom level all the way up into the C-suite. Final question, Mike. If you were to give a piece of advice to a future channel or alliance leader, let's say someone that's driving a forklift now in a warehouse, delivering shifting boxes, what would you give them?
Take risks.
Okay.
Never be afraid to take risks.
When have you? Can you give me a memory of when you've taken a risk?
I've taken lots of risks.
Have they always paid off?
No. Good God, no. Excuse the language, but no, absolutely not. I've taken risks that have paid off. I've taken risks that haven't paid off. I think some of the ones that paid off tremendously. I was at CenturyLink, I think, when we first met. I left a comfortable job that I've been promoted in relatively recently to join AWS. Big unknown at the time. That was before COVID. Obviously went through the pandemic. I changed roles a couple of times at AWS. Ended up running or being in the team that ran the relationship between AWS and Salesforce. And I chose to leave, and everybody thought I was crazy. Why would you possibly leave AWS? This was 2 years ago, but I wasn't growing anymore. I wasn't finding those opportunities to do things differently and to forge my own path. And I think that was a big risk. Leaving. People often don't leave AWS for their own reasons. But I did, and for me it's paid dividends so far. Really found a place where you can explore your passion, which is hugely fulfilling.
I think that's a great piece of advice for any marketeer, really, is to continue to have that growth mindset.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Mike, thank you very much for joining me on the Tech Marketing
Pleasure.
Podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, John.